All right, guys, I'm going to spend a little time here, go through the Marbury versus Madison case with you to try to help you guys understand it as best as I can. And then after we read through that, we'll go through the worksheet that corresponds with it on the next page in your packet. Okay. So the Marbury versus Madison case. So if you, as I read through it, make sure you're flipping back to that previous page to fill that out as well. All right, so that previous page, let's share this with you. It looks like this. We're just looking for the date of the case, the power of the Supreme Court that was created by this case, and then we'll answer those three questions. What was the issue involved? How did the Supreme Court rule? And what is the precedent? Remember, precedent is the key. That's the piece that we have to understand is really a big power that comes out of the Supreme Court. So when the Supreme Court makes a decision, it creates the precedent. So once they make the decision here, all courts below that, every court in the country has to rule in that way on any similar issues. So that's why the Supreme Court's power is pretty big. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the reading. I'll read through that. I'll kind of mark it up as if you want to do the same on your end, you can. Oh, no, not that. All right, guys. It's been a little while since I had to do the Zoom stuff recording. So give me a second. There we go. All right. So Marbury versus Madison. So you're filling out that work, the first page there. The date of the case is 1803. Right. And the power of the Supreme Court created by this case, if you want to write it down now, it's judicial review. That was the term we learned in the notes. All right. Or on the Google slides if you went through that on your own. Okay. So judicial review is the power that comes out of this case. Okay. So it says in 1800, President John Adams. So I'll just highlight some of the main key players here. All right. Wrong one. Let's go to markup. That's why I think I put the wrong. Clear all those. Close that. There we go. Markup, highlighter, green. There we go. So our first player is John Adams. Ran to be reelected as the president, but he lost to Thomas Jefferson. So two of our a couple of our first presidents in our country's history. During his last week in office, Adams appointed a bunch of men to be justices of the peace. Remember, when we learned the president gets to appoint judges, both at the Supreme Court level and at those lower federal district levels, okay? Peace in the District of Columbia. Each man would receive a paper commission that was signed and sealed. The commissions were prepared, but they were not sent before Adams left office. So when President Jefferson took over, he refused to send them. So think about that. Like, you just were elected president. You're Thomas Jefferson. You're the new president of the United States. All right. You realize that Adams meant for these guys to be the new judges. Right. But the paperwork was never completed. So now if you're Jefferson, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, well, he meant to send it, so yeah, we'll finish it off? Or are you going to say, well, too bad. Now I'm president. I get to pick those judges. Okay. Obviously, President Jefferson's going to say, I want to pick my own justices. So he refused to send the paperwork. Okay. One of those men, William Marbury, was upset. He wanted to be a judge. So he asked the United States Supreme Court to issue a legal order called a writ of mandamus. Now, we don't have to memorize these concepts. Okay. But it says in this case, a writ would have required Marbury's commission to be delivered. Okay. So it's basically the Supreme Court it's giving the power of the Supreme Court to make a decision on behalf of the president. All right. So here's the argument. The argument says that, did you notice that Marbury didn't start at a regular local court? Remember, that was one of the things. Original jurisdiction says that cases can start right at the Supreme Court. Normally that would be backwards, but in 1789, Congress had passed a law saying people could start at the Supreme Court. If all they wanted was a writ of mandamus. So basically the Supreme Court just to make a quick decision on that situation. Marbury argued that he was entitled to the writ because his commission had already been created under the last president, and argued that the Supreme Court had the power to issue that writ. Okay. And when we say writ, it's like issue that decision. Okay. So here's the decision. Remember, this is what the precedence is. When the Supreme Court makes a decision, every situation similar to that going forward has to follow that decision. All right, so the Supreme Court agreed that Marbury had a right to receive his commission. All right, so the Supreme Court said, yes, he should be a Supreme Court judge, is essentially what the Supreme Court decided. but disagreed that the court has the power to issue this writ. Right. So this is what's odd. So we're used to court cases, guys, like especially if you watch like Law and Order type shows, you're used to courts being guilty, not guilty, done. Right. You're either guilty, you're not guilty, and here's your sentence. All right. Here's what your punishment is going to be. When the Supreme Court rules, they write out an explanation. Okay. So it's almost like they're writing an essay. This is why we chose and decided in this way. So there's an explanation to their decision. And that's so that in future cases similar to that, all the people below, all the courts below the Supreme Court can now follow suit. And that's how that precedent is created, right? So the court said, yes, we do believe that he should receive his commission, but they said the court does not have the power to do that, all right? So this is where they could have, this is kind of interesting because the Supreme Court could have taken on a lot of power if they would have said, yeah, we could do that. We have the power to do that. It probably would have turned into a big problem because then the Supreme Court would have been looked at as eventually probably looked at as abusing its power. It says why? Because the Supreme Court gets its power directly from the Constitution, and the Constitution says only certain kinds of cases can start at the Supreme Court. That meant the 1789 law passed by Congress was unconstitutional. Congress did not have the power to allow more kinds of cases to start at the Supreme Court. Therefore, the Supreme Court said it could not help Marbury get his commission. Okay, there's some confusion there, so this will kind of tie it all together in this last section. So it says, so what? So here's your precedent. Believe it or not, this is considered one of the most important cases the Supreme Court has ever decided. That's because it was the first time the Supreme Court struck down an act of Congress for being unconstitutional. So there's that, remember, checks and balances. There's that check of power. The Supreme Court can determine if actions of the president or laws written by Congress are constitutional or not. This is the first time they do it. So this kind of creates, essentially, it creates the power of the Supreme Court. So the idea that the Supreme Court has the final say about what is constitutional is called judicial review. Judicial review lets the judicial branch do two things. One, interpret the Constitution, decide what it means, and two, stop the executive and legislative branches from doing things that go against the Constitution. All right, so that's what this case ultimately does. So the decision in Marbury versus Madison helped cement the judicial branch as equal with the other two branches of government by giving it equal power. Okay, so let's go back to another page. If you weren't filling it out as we read through it, you want to fill this out. So we already said the date of the case. On my paper, so I don't have to flip the screens, was 1803. The power that was created, we called it judicial review. All right, so what was the issue involved in the case? The issue involved was whether or not the Supreme Court could rule on giving Marbury his power to be a judge. Okay, so that was the issue involved, whether or not the Supreme Court had the power to say, yep, you're a judge, all right, or no, you can't be a judge. Kind of overrule the president there. You need to pause this as I keep moving on to the next question. Just pause it, and then after you finish answering it, go ahead and hit play again. Number two, how did the Supreme Court rule? All right, remember the Supreme Court, as we read through that, the Supreme Court's decision was that the Supreme Court doesn't have the power to do that. All right, and by making that decision, they created the idea of judicial review. All right, that the Supreme Court can only decide if actions of government are constitutional or not. Okay, and number three, that leads to the precedent. Remember, precedent is, going forward, what does this case mean? All right, so the precedent that is created is that from that point on, that's the power of the Supreme Court. The power of the Supreme Court is now established. That their job is to check the other two branches. They can check the executive branch to make sure the president or actions of the executive branch are constitutional. And then they can check the laws and actions of the legislative branch to make sure those are constitutional. So that was the ultimate precedence that was set, the term of the concept of judicial review and the power of the Supreme Court. Okay. All right. Again, if you're still filling that out, just hit pause so you can finish that. And then once you're ready, play again so you can move along with me. So let's go back to that page. And we'll go down to the second part. So what we have here, guys, so these are some different, I guess, laws that try to be created at different times in our country's history, and then what the Supreme Court said about it. Okay. And then we had to decide what do we think happened next. But by me going through this, we'll understand what happened next. Okay. So one law, this was 1989. All right. Congress wrote a law called the Flag Protection Act of 1989, making flag burning a crime. So in 1989, Congress made a law. The president was willing to sign it into law, and saying that if you get caught burning a flag, it's a criminal offense now. So you could serve jail time or be fined. So that law goes to the Supreme Court. All right. A lot of people think this is the law still today, but it's not, because the Supreme Court ruled on it, and Congress said that Congress could not make it a crime to burn the U.S. flag. Burning the flag is an expression protected by the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. So even if those Supreme Court judges at that time agreed with it, and I'm sure many of them probably did, they probably agreed that burning the U.S. flag isn't right, or you shouldn't be able to do it, or you shouldn't do it, I should say. All right. But they have to be careful, because remember, they set the precedent. So if they say, yep, that can be a crime, then that opens the door for other forms of expression to maybe become crimes down the road. Okay. So they cut it down, saying that was a part of your First Amendment right to freedom of speech. Okay. So what happened next? All right. So our three options is, did Congress change the wording of the law so they could make it constitutional? Would the change would require a constitutional amendment? So they would actually have to make an amendment to the Constitution in order to make that illegal to burn the flag, or an amendment was added to the Constitution banning flag burning. Okay. Well, we know, okay, go through these real quick. We know that there's no amendment for flag burning. We went through the amendments already. All right. And we know that no law came about allowing flag burning, because I would have covered that. We would have covered that. And so this is our last option. All right. So change would have required amendment, but there was not enough support. Okay. All right. Next one, part B. Line Item Veto Act of 1996 allows the president to veto parts of a bill while passing the rest. All right. So this would basically say, okay, the president gets a bill, all right, that could become a law. The president reads through it and says, okay, I like that. Nope, don't want that. Starts crossing stuff out that he doesn't want in the bill anymore. Okay. And then he passes what's left. So essentially keeping what he likes and getting rid of what he doesn't like. Right. So that was actually a law that was passed in 1996, allowing the president to do that. But what we see is that would give the president a lot of power, okay, in a way to and to some extent, maybe even abuse his power, right? Now he could take a bill and change it to the way he likes it, okay? So Congress could not give the president the power to veto certain parts of a law. The Constitution says president must sign a bill or return it to Congress, not change it, right? So that law was going to give the president the power to change it and then pass it, right, without sending it back to Congress for approval. Okay. All right. So our option over here, all right, there was no try on an amendment, and there is no amendment for this. So what they did was they changed the wording of it. So the president can make changes, but it has to go back to Congress to get approved, and they'd have to vote on it again if he makes changes to it. All right, Part C, the Stolen Valor Act. All right, 2005 makes lying about military service awards a crime. So if you said you were in the military, you won awards. In 2005, they made a law that you could have been punished for that, criminally punished. Okay, so it goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, we don't know about this law. I don't know if this is constitutional. Congress could not make it a crime to lie about receiving military medals. Free speech means the government can't decide that some lies are punishable. All right. So that line, I think, sums it up right there the best. All right. As much as I would hope, all right, I would assume we would all agree that lying that you were in the military and lying that you won awards in the military is wrong, right? You shouldn't do that because people literally die for the country, in the military and are wounded, all right, from action in the military, and they give up their lives for years in the military, right? So I think we'd all agree that lying about that is not good. That's wrong. But the Supreme Court has to look at it from this perspective. If we start punishing people for that lie, all right, what other lies can we punish people for next year, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, right? So, and that's why the Supreme Court's got to look at it. Even if the Supreme Court judges agree, like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. We can't have laws that punish you for telling a lie. Okay? All right, so let's go to the last part here. All right, so there's no amendments for this one. No, that's text box, sorry guys. All right, so we know there's no amendment for it. They didn't try to pass an amendment. So this is another one where Congress had to change the law, wording of the law, so it would be constitutional. And then Part D, Voting Rights Act Amendment of 1970 requires states to change the voting age from 21 to 18. All right, so as we read that one, it says, so remember, we said it multiple times. Hopefully you remember when we talked about federalism. We said the powers of the state governments, the power of the federal government, right? And when we talked about elections, right? I've asked it multiple times and say, well, who has the power of elections? And usually I have a handful of you guys that would say the states, right? So we hopefully have that down. The states run the elections. So the power of elections belong to the states. So when the federal government tried to pass just a law, all right, to change the voting age from 21 to 18, the Supreme Court said, nope, you can't do that, right? The Constitution does not give the power to make rules about state and local elections, all right? That belongs to the states to make rules about state and local elections. So Congress could not give 18-year-olds the right to vote. Well, since Congress couldn't do it, and then by that point in the 1970s, some states were allowing 18-year-olds to vote and some weren't, all right? They didn't change the law to make it constitutional, all right? They want an amendment, and it wasn't that they didn't have enough support. They actually had to change it with an amendment. So we talked about that, the amendment that lowered the voting age to 18. Okay, so the bottom part just matches this up. So we can see that D will go here. In 1971, the 26th Amendment said no state could deny the right to vote to anyone age 18 or over. Amending the Constitution this way means people 18 and over have the right to vote in every election everywhere in the United States. So once it's an amendment, now it covers the entire country. Okay. When it was a law like that, it didn't work because the federal government didn't have the power of elections. So the Supreme Court sent that back to the states and said, nope, only the states have the power over elections. So in order to make it for the whole country, they had to pass an amendment. Okay. All right. The next one, this is going to be letter A. So we're talking about the Flag Burning Act. All right. It says there have been several attempts to amend the Constitution to make it illegal to desecrate the flag. So far, these attempts have failed. No law has made it far enough in Congress to even have a debate. All right. So there's always people that want to make it a law that you can't burn the flag. But if it ever was passed, we know the Supreme Court would kick it back again. Again, I would think many of us would agree that it's hopefully most of us would agree it's not the right thing to do. Whatever reason you're choosing to burn the flag, but the Supreme Court's going to look at that as a right to your freedom of speech. So that's why laws like that have not been passed. Okay. The next one is going to be E. Right? No, not E. This is B, right? Oh, I said E. All right, it says members of Congress revise the law, so Congress would have to quickly approve the president's changes before they affect. This would affect the legislative process up and keep the process constitutional. The new version of the law hasn't passed Congress yet. So they rewrote the law. Remember, this was the line item veto act, all right, where the president can make changes to a bill. All right, so they try to rewrite it where the president can make changes and then send it back to Congress but that still has not passed. Okay, so as of right now, the president gets a bill to his desk, he needs to sign it or veto it as is. He can't make changes to it. The words are the words of the bill. He can't make any corrections or suggestions or anything like that. Okay. And the last one, this will be C. Members of Congress revise the law so it's a crime to benefit financially. So they tried making a law where you could be punished just for lying about military service and winning awards. But they realized, the Supreme Court said, no, that's people's freedom of speech. If you want to go out and say that, whatever, right? Even if the Supreme Court said, it's not right, you shouldn't lie about that stuff. But here's where they changed it. They said, we can keep it a law, and this would be constitutional, that members of Congress revise the law so it's a crime to benefit financially from a lie. All right. So if you say a lie and you're getting paid because of that lie, or you're making money off of that lie, now you can be punished. Okay. So if you're claiming you had military service and it's a lie, now you can't be punished. All right. If you have any questions for me, feel free to email me, or you can send me a message on Remind. But that should cover those parts of the worksheet. Okay. I will post another video tomorrow then on our next one, which will be Plessy versus Ferguson and the Board of Education versus Brown versus the Board of Education. Okay. So just keep on doing the work, guys. Watch these videos to learn what you need to learn and get what you need to get. All right.